My parents stole my $86,000. But Grandma's will froze their $400,000. Now they're desperate for my help. I was 19 when I first learned what betrayal felt like. Not from a stranger. Not from a friend, but from the two people I trusted most in the world, Mom and Dad. It started with a phone call from my university's finance office. "Hi, is this Aiden Clark?" "Yeah, speaking. Just following up, your tuition payment didn't go through this semester. We sent 2 reminders. Alright, you still planning to attend?" My heart dropped into my stomach like a dead weight. I had a college fund. I had $86,000 set aside by Grandma June the day I was born. She called it my freedom fund, said it was to make sure I'd never be trapped like she was married young. No education, dependent on a man who drank and shouted more than he worked. So what the hell was the university talking about? I called my mom in a panic. "Mom, did something happen to my college account?" "They said the tuition didn't." She cut me off. "Sweetheart, don't worry about it. There was just a small mix-up with the bank. Your father's handling it." Click that. Was the first red flag. My mom never hung up on me unless she was hiding something by the end of that week. If I found out the truth, they'd emptied the entire account. All $86,000. Gone. Used it to renovate their kitchen. Like a luxury cruise. And no joke, buy my dad a vintage 1967 Mustang. Cherry red. He called it his midlife resurrection. I was livid. Not just because they stole my money, but because they didn't even tell me. They acted like it was nothing, like it was theirs to take. When I confronted them, Mom said, "It's not stealing. You're our son. Everything we have is yours anyway." But that's the thing, everything I had. They had no problem taking that. The fallout was ugly. I dropped out of college. I moved in with my friend Noah and worked 3 part-time jobs just to afford rent and ramen noodles. Every week I saw Instagram photos of my parents sipping champagne, on yachts, and taking selfies under the Eiffel Tower. Meanwhile, I was scrubbing grease off diner floors. Then, out of nowhere, came a letter from Grandma June's lawyer. She'd passed away. I hadn't even known she was sick. The letter wasn't just a notification, it was a summons. I was listed as the executor of her estate, and she'd left behind a will. What? I found inside changed everything. Grandma June was a quiet woman, but she didn't play when it came to justice. Apparently, she'd suspected my parents would try something shady with my fund, so she did something brilliant. She made her entire estate conditional. $400,000 in cash. A paid-off house in Florida, a vintage jewelry collection that had belonged to her grandmother. All frozen. The clause. If at any point prior to my death, my son or daughter-in-law withdraws funds from the educational account of my grandson, Caden Clark, the full inheritance shall be frozen. The only person with authority to lift this freeze is Aiden himself. Signed it 5 years before she died, she knew. And suddenly, my parents, the same ones who said, "You'll understand when you're older," the same ones who laughed off my anger, were broke. They couldn't touch a penny of Grandma's money. And now they were calling me. The first message came from my mom. "Aiden, honey, we made a mistake. We didn't know how badly this would hurt you. Please come home. We need to talk." The second came from Dad. "Son, we've been cut off. Your grandma's lawyer said you're the only one who can authorize access. Don't do anything rash. We're still your parents." I didn't answer either of them, but, I listened. I started visiting Grandma's lawyer, Mr. Pritchard, every week. The man was a relic. Suspenders, pocket watch. Smelled like old books and peppermint. Your grandmother was sharp. He told me once. She knew where the cracks were in people, especially in your parents. I asked him if I could move into her house, the one in Florida. He handed me the keys without hesitation. "It's yours now, son. Every room. Every memory." My parents showed up 2 weeks later, knocking at the door like they hadn't burned the bridge we'd once walked on together. I didn't open it. They left notes, voicemails, even flowers one day. They sat on the porch for hours in the sun, like Beggars waiting for a miracle, but I didn't open the door. I couldn't. Not yet. That's when things started to get weird. First, it was my Uncle Rob, Dad's brother. He called me out of the blue. Aiden, I don't know what your parents did, but they're in deep. There's talk of foreclosure. They maxed out their cards. They're not eating. Then came the messages from old family friends. Give them a chance, Aiden. They're still your blood. You don't want this hanging over your heart forever. But none of them were there when I cried on that grimy apartment floor, trying to figure out if I could afford gas or groceries. None of them offered me a second chance. Then a package arrived, no return address. Inside was a VHS tape. What is this? 1992. I dug out an old player from the attic, plugged it into Grandma's dusty TV, and hit play. It was her Grandma June. She looked straight at the camera like she was staring through time. If you're watching this, Aiden, then they took your money, and I'm gone. But I want you to know something. You don't owe them forgiveness just because they're your parents. Family is earned, not given. But if, and only if, you decide to help them, do it on your terms, not theirs. Not anyone else's. She smiled. Remember? Sometimes justice comes in silence, and sometimes the best revenge is to live better than they ever imagined you would. The screen went black. I sat there in silence for a long, long time. Now I live in Grandma's house. I run a small graphic design business from her sunroom. I wake up to birds instead of sirens, my parents. They still call, still beg. But here's the kicker. I haven't made a decision yet. Every day, I walk past the safe where the will authorization is locked away. One signature. And they get everything. But they took everything from me first, so I wait. Let them feel what it's like. Let them sit in the silence they once left me in. I don't know what kind of petty universe exists where a stolen college fund turns into a full-blown power war. But here I am, stuck in the middle of one. Grandma's house feels too quiet some days. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, the haunted kind. Like the air is still holding on to words that were never said. And choices that can't be undone. It had been 3 weeks since my parents last tried knocking, but silence doesn't mean surrender. That's when the emails started coming in. Subject: regarding Grandma June's assets, family discussion request. I didn't even have to open them to know who they were from. Mom's classic passive-aggressive tone was practically embedded in the font. The latest one read, Aiden, I understand you're upset. We were selfish, yes. But this isn't just about us anymore. We could lose everything. Our house, your father's job, our reputation. Please don't let this become permanent. You have the power to fix this. Power. They never cared about me having it. Before now, it was all they could talk about. That night, I had a dream. I was sitting in Grandma's kitchen. Everything was bright, warm, golden. She was making her lemon tea, the one she swore could cure heartbreak. I told her I didn't know what to do. I said I felt like I was becoming them. Bitter, cold, small. She looked at me, her eyes soft but sharp, the way they always were when she knew I was lying to myself. Sweet boy, she said, you're not becoming them. You're holding the mirror they never wanted to look into. I woke up crying. The next morning, I found a man sitting on my porch steps. Khaki suit, cheap cologne. Holding a leather briefcase like it was made of secrets. Aiden Clark, he said, standing up. I don't do door-to-door evangelism, I muttered, brushing past him. I represent your parents. They've filed for early inheritance access. Conditional override. They believe you're acting under emotional distress and wish to petition for a legal bypass. I stopped cold. They're suing me. He gave a tight-lipped nod. It's not a lawsuit. More like a challenge to your capacity as executor. I laughed. Loud, too loud. They think I'm not mentally stable. They stole from me. He raised an eyebrow. There's no paper trail for the theft. No legal complaint filed. No financial freeze at the time. Translation: if it wasn't official, it didn't count. So I made it official with Mr. Pritchard's help. I filed a full report on the fund. Every statement, every withdrawal, the signatures. The transfers, turns out, skew? You can't steal your kid's education savings without leaving a pretty obvious trail of fingerprints. But here's the plot twist. They expected it. I found out later that Dad had started quietly transferring assets. Months ago, liquidating accounts, hiding things under Mom's maiden name, even moving some funds offshore. The $400,000. That was just the visible part of the iceberg. The rest, buried. Disguised. And now that Grandma's will froze their access. They were suffocating, but there was one thing they hadn't counted on. Grandma's journal. I found it in the attic. Stuffed behind old photo albums, wrapped in a silk scarf. That smelled faintly of cedar and rose oil. It wasn't just random entries about her garden or the neighborhood gossip. It was a log. Page after page of handwritten notes, conversations, suspicions, even a list of names, people she trusted. People she'd IDN, single quotes T. And right in the middle. If they betray him, they'll betray each other too. Grandma saw it coming. And she wasn't just protecting me. She was planting seeds. Letting time do the watering. I decided to test the soil. I called my parents. First time in months, Mom answered on the second ring. Aiden, oh my God, you called. I want to talk, I said, keeping my voice flat. Of course, sweetheart. Anything. Are you coming home? Not there. Neutral ground. We met at a public library. Neutral, quiet, no weapons, but words. Dad wore a blazer like he was meeting a lawyer. Mom looked thinner, her hair tied back too tight. They didn't say hi. They didn't hug me. They looked like people trying not to drown. I slid a document across the table. What's this? Dad asked. Proof of withdrawal. Statements. Your signatures. Everything you used to empty my account. Mom's hand trembled as she flipped through the pages. Dad's jaw locked. Why are you doing this? Why did you? I fired back. They had no answer, just silence. Heavy, ugly. Finally, Mom whispered, we needed it. So did I. Then I pulled out Grandma's journal, dropped it like a gavel. I have her notes, her timeline. She knew what you were doing before you even did it. She knew you'd come after the will. Dad's face went pale, like a man watching his house burn down with the front door locked. What do you want? He asked finally. You didn't come here just to lecture us. And there it was, the moment they were finally ready to beg. But I wasn't sure I wanted them to. You want me to unlock the inheritance? I said, maybe I will, but not without conditions. Dad scoffed. You think this is a negotiation? No, I said. I think this is justice. I slid over a second envelope, a contract. 1. I drafted with Pritchard. Terms of reconciliation, they'd have to publicly acknowledge the theft. Return every asset purchased with that money. Sign over their half of the house to a trust. In Grandma's name, set up a scholarship fund under my name for kids like me who got robbed by the people who were supposed to protect them. If they agreed, I'd unfreeze half the inheritance. If not, it'd rot in their pride. Dad didn't sign, Mom cried. I walked out of that library without looking back. Now, sit on the back porch every night, watching the sun dip behind palm trees, wondering what kind of man I'm becoming. Not bitter, not angry, but steel-forged because some of us weren't born into safe homes. Some of us had to build one from betrayal, brick by painful brick, and while they drown in the hole they dug. I'm building something. Higher, something mine. You ever notice how silence is louder after confrontation? It's not peace. It's aftershock. That night, after I walked out of the library, I didn't go home. I drove nowhere in particular, just far. Asphalt rolled beneath me like a tape recording. My phone buzzed a dozen times. but I let it rot in the Q folder. Mom, Dad, unknown numbers. Pritchard once. I didn't want to hear anyone's voice, not even my own. I ended up parking outside Grandma's old church. The cross was unlit, but the front door was cracked. I hadn't been here since the funeral. Inside. The air smelled like old wood and candle wax. I slid into the back pew like I was sneaking into a memory. The stained glass windows still glowed faintly with city light. And then I saw her. Mrs. Klein, the church secretary. Gray hair bent back, cardigan with more holes than buttons. She squinted at me for a moment, then smiled that thin-lipped grin like I was 10 years old again. Aiden, she whispered. June said you'd come. I blinked. Excuse me? She didn't answer. She just shuffled toward the altar, opened a small wooden cabinet, and pulled out a safe box. Black metal. No label. Just a keyhole. She left this for you, Mrs. Klein said, handing me a key I didn't remember giving her. Told me not to open it, no matter what. Told me you'd come here when you needed to see the truth. I took the box. My hands were shaking. Back in my car, I opened it. There were 3 things inside: a flash drive, a sealed letter, and a folded piece of legal parchment stamped with Pre-Trust AMIND. MIATM. My breath caught. I opened the letter first. Aiden, if you're reading this, it means you chose truth over comfort. Good. You were never meant to follow. You were meant to break the pattern. The flash drive has something your parents hoped I'd never see. I saw it anyway. You need 2. See it too, and the parchment. That's your real inheritance. The will was never about money. It was a test of loyalty, of character, of who would betray whom when no one was looking. They failed. But you might be the one who saves us. All. Love always. June Nye plugged the flash drive into my laptop at a 24/7 diner, fingers trembling on the keyboard. There were 2 video files. The first one was dated July 18th, 3 years ago. It was footage from a home camera. Grainy, badly lit, but unmistakable. Dad standing in Grandma's study, looking over a drawer. Then. Mom, she enters, whispering furiously. Did you find it? She moved it. I told you she was on to us. I don't care. We need that money before he graduates. That's when it hit me. This wasn't panic. This wasn't desperation. This was premeditated. They hadn't stolen my fund out of sudden need. They planned it, coldly, calculated, like robbing a stranger, not their own son. The second file. It was audio. A phone call recording. Quote, Grandma had tapped the landline. It was a conversation between my dad and someone named Gregory Hill. Gregory, you sure the account's clean? Dad, it's under my wife's maiden name. No one will trace it back unless they know what to look for. Gregory and the boy. He's got no clue. Dad, he thinks we're paying off debt. He's soft. He won't question us. He trusts us. I felt physically ill. They didn't just steal my future. They laughed about how easy it was. I opened the parchment last. It was a second will. Unregistered, hidden, and far more brutal in it. Grandma revoked every previous financial distribution. To my parents, she placed the entire estate, not just the $400,000, but her properties, bonds, pension funds, and a private charitable foundation controlled by one person. Me, Aiden Clark. Clause 7, should either Henry or Karen Clark be found complicit in financial misappropriation or deceit toward their son, their claim to my estate shall be rendered null and void pending my grandson's discretion. I sat there in the diner booth, surrounded by the clink of coffee mugs and low jazz music, holding the kind of leverage that doesn't just change a life, it reshapes generations. They thought they were the puppet masters, but Grandma, she rewrote the whole script 3 days later, showed the video to Mr. Pritchard. He didn't even blink. We'll register this version of the will immediately, he said, adjusting his glasses, and we'll file a cease and desist on their petition. What about the money they moved? I asked. He smirked. We'll find it. We always do. But just when I thought I had them cornered, something else happened. A letter arrived at my apartment, no return address. Inside, one line handwritten on cream-colored paper. You're not the only one June trusted with secrets. Meet me. Midnight, the conservatory. Underneath the note, a photo dot of Grandma sitting with someone I didn't recognize, a younger man, tall, wearing a military jacket, on the back of the photo. To June, love always, M. I turned it over again. There was something haunting in Grandma's smile in that photo. Not the kind she gave me when we played cards. This was different. Intimate. Guarded dot. Who was he? And why was he connected now? Midnight was 3 hours away. I didn't sleep. I didn't blink. Because something told me this story didn't start with me. And it sure as hell won't end with them. It smelled like roses and betrayal. I hadn't been here in years. Not since Grandma and I used to sit in silence, sipping lukewarm chamomile tea while cicadas screamed into the night. Now, the only sound was my own heartbeat echoing against the glass walls. I waited. Midnight ticked in my bones. Then, he walked in. Tall, clean-shaven, mid-50s, military posture. Wearing a long coat like he stepped out of an espionage novel. His presence didn't announce itself, it loomed. You must be Aiden, he said, voice like gravel dipped in honey. I nodded slowly. And you're handed me an envelope, then sat on the bench like he owned the stars above us. Inside the envelope, a photograph, a young version of my grandma. Laughing, radiant, leaning into him. Not my grandfather. This was someone else. This, he said, was before your mother was born. Your grandmother and I. We had plans. I stared. You were lovers. He gave a half smile. We were more than that. We were co-conspirators. She didn't just teach me love. She taught me justice. My throat tightened. Who are you? I was her attorney before Pritchard, before she married Henry Clark, your grandfather. I helped her create the second will. But I also helped her design something else. He pulled out a small binder from his coat. It was labeled Contingency Protocol, Clark Legacy. Inside, a detailed plan, accounts, names, hidden donations, off the books, real estate. Grandma had rerouted more than half her wealth long before she did, and not just to punish my parents, to protect me. She knew what your parents were, he said. She knew what they were capable of. But she also knew you'd need to choose. Not just whether to forgive them, but whether you'd become them. I sat in stunned silence. He stood to leave. One last thing, he said. There's a vault. In Vermont, it's under your name. Only you can open it. When you're ready, that's where your final answer is. And just like that, he walked into the night. The next morning, I drove to my parents' house. No more silence. No more hiding. Dad opened the door like a man already guilty. Mom stood behind him, wringing her hands like she was auditioning for sympathy. We're sorry, she said before I even spoke. We weren't thinking, we were scared. I pulled out the flash drive and tossed it on the kitchen counter like a grenade. You were greedy, not scared. Dad stepped forward. We'll return the money. All of it. Just, please. The estate is frozen. We're drowning. And whose fault is that? I asked. You thought I wouldn't find out. You gambled your own son's future? You don't understand? No, you don't understand, I snapped. I know everything. The second will. The offshore accounts. The staged lies. And now, I'm the one holding the keys, not you. Silence. I'm not here to forgive you, I said, voice calm, almost detached. I'm here to tell you that you lost more than money. You lost me. Mom broke into sobs. Dad just sat down, defeated, hollow. I didn't stay. A week later. The vault was beneath an old farmhouse Grandma had inherited from her sister. The key worked. Inside. It's a single safety deposit box. And a handwritten note. Aiden, if you're reading this, then you didn't just survive. You chose truth. You chose integrity. That means you're ready for what comes next. This isn't just a vault. It's the beginning of your real legacy. Money is power, but character, that's dynasty. Use what I left behind to build, not destroy. Heal, not punish. But never forget, they were broken long before you were born. But you're different. Love always. June under the note. Title: Deeds to 6 properties, stocks. A checkbook from an untouched trust worth $2.3 million. And a black velvet pouch. Inside the pouch, a ring. Gold, engraved with the Clark family crest. But it wasn't just heirloom jewelry. It was symbolic. Grandma left me the throne, not to rule over my parents, but to rewrite what our family stood for. That was 2 years ago. I still haven't spoken to them. I used the trust to start a scholarship fund under Grandma's name. Kids like me, who got stabbed in the back by the ones who were supposed to protect them, they're getting their shot now. I visit the conservatory sometimes. I planted new roses. Okay? Red ones. Not for love, for resilience. Because pain doesn't always pass, but it can bloom if you know where to plant it. The end. Asterisk. If you were in Aiden's shoes, would you forgive your parents or walk away forever? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I really want to hear what you do. And hey, if you love stories that hit you right in the heart, twist your brain and leave you thinking for days, subscribe now and join the fam. I've got more jaw-dropping tales coming your way. You won't want to miss what's next.